Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. My clock on my computer says 4:02, and it's getting later in the afternoon, so I know folks probably have other things to do. I think I know many of you on the call. My name is John Elsesser. I'm Executive Director here at IMPEA, and we are very pleased to again partner with our friends at IDOE to provide the next installment of webinar training on EANS. And like last time, joining us today is Cole Dietrich, who's the Director of Title Grant and Support at IDOE, and Andrew Mazer, who many of you have interacted with, I'm sure, who is our state ombudsman and is also in his spare time a title grant specialist as well. I think all of you by now are Zoom aficionados, so we don't have to get into too much of that, but we will ask you to please keep your microphones muted. Keep your cameras off just to kind of keep the clutter off the screen. And as much as possible, feel free to use the chat function. And Andrew and Cole and Heidi and I will be kind of watching that, but we'll try to address as many of those questions as they come up. If not, we'll address them possibly at the end if we have time as well. This will be recorded. And you will get a copy of the slides as a part of that recording. I think Andrew already posted the link in the chat for both the EANS webpage and for the slide deck. So with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to turn it over to Cole Dietrich.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to John and Heidi and the team there for having us. And thank you to all of you for allowing us to spend the hour with you to talk about the EANS application. I know we've talked about the EANS allowable activities previously. So today we're excited to launch into the actual application. We'll touch on vendor registration as well. And I wanted to thank Andrew Mazer for all of his help on the EANS program and getting it up and running. Without him, I definitely would not have been able to do it to this level of quality. So I appreciate Andrew. He is always an advocate for all schools and non-public schools also. And so I want to thank him for all of his support on that. Without further ado, I'll jump into the part we've all been looking forward to, which is the application for EANS funding. Let me share my screen here. All right, if Andrew, you could just let me know that you can see everything okay before I proceed.
I can.
Perfect. All right, so you'll see our contact information up here. Please reach out to me and Andrew as your first point of contact. And the other members, Laura, Brandon, and Alma, will be helping us on vendor registration as well as application approval. But Andrew and I can continue to be your main points of contact for all things EANS. Really quickly, we'll go over our agenda. So we'll discuss, touch briefly on the allowable uses for EANS, which we discussed in our previous webinar, but it's always worth a refresher. We'll do a demonstration on the registration for the EANS application portal, as well as an EANS application walkthrough. Oops. We'll also do a vendor application walkthrough. As I mentioned, we'll talk about some of the points that you'll want to work on with your vendor ahead of time if you have some partners identified already that you'd like to work with. And then EANS 2 funding updates, we'll be able to touch briefly on that. Big picture, you know what I know still. It's in a very short portion of the law. We're waiting on the U.S. Department of Education to give us some guidance and interpretation on their end, and then we'll be able to push that information out to the field. But the good news is the time and effort we spent on EANS 1 will not be wasted, and it will be able to be used for EANS 2 as well for the large part. So touching base again on allowable activities for your EANS funding, we could spend days going over a webinar of each individual activity and whether it could be allowable or not. And Andrew has dealt with a great number of great questions that we've gotten from you all in terms of how you could use these funds to best support your students. We love the innovative thinking, especially in terms of how to respond and grow after COVID now to meet the needs of our students. So we went instead with our goal of being to give you sort of the scaffolding and frame of reference for allowability with these funds. That way you can sort of pre-screen a little bit before you actually, the rubber meets the road on your applications. So when you're thinking, is this allowable? Think temporary rather than permanent. So temporary fixtures, things that can be removed from the building. If you're thinking air purifiers, we are unable to do any sort of HVAC system repairs, but any portable filtration system devices or property that can be taken at the end of the program, that is not our intent. And I'll touch on that here in just a little bit. But the important part is the feds don't care about whether we take it back or not. The feds care about having that public control over the property. So those controls are the only thing that we really have to demonstrate here. Andrew and I will talk about that here in just a moment. So think temporary instead of permanent. Something you can unplug, something that's not plumbed into your plumbing or water supply. Think repairing rather than construction. So you won't be able to do any construction activities with EANS funding, but you will be able to repair things such as windows to improve indoor air ventilation or indoor air quality. You could repair the windows, but you could not have construction and replace all new windows. And then in thinking, is this an expense that I have that's operational in nature, just sort of something that I would incur as a cost of being part of school regardless, or is this something related to the pandemic or our response to the pandemic moving forward? So those are sort of the three main points we'll want you to keep in mind. And then just going through some of the bullet points here that Andrew's included, HVAC boiler systems, anything that is a renovation or an improvement of your school facility will not be allowed. So no construction of additional rooms. It needs to be unplugged, on wheels, portable, able to be removed so that the public agent can maintain, like I said, that control. Buses or vans would not be allowable. Reasonable transportation is allowable in EANS. So that could be perhaps finding a contractor for an additional bus route or some additional busing needs, but that would not include the purchasing of an additional bus for your school. The building of new gyms and auditoriums, again, that would be sort of a capital improvement for your school, not allowed with EANS. Installing bells, systems, or carpets, again, that's sort of not necessarily related to the pandemic. That is sort of an operational cost, something that's sort of baked into the cost of doing school. Paying staff salaries and stipends. So we would not be able to pay non-public school staff. This is very similar to equitable share with other federal grants, if you're familiar with that, in the fact that we cannot pay any funds to employees of the non-public school. With EANS funding, it would need to be through a third-party vendor. So perhaps a third-party vendor is providing an additional tutor or teacher, but that would need to be, again, sought through a third-party vendor and contracted service. We had a lot of questions, great questions in terms of, virus reduction. We need touchless faucets, dryers, water bottle fountains, or water bottle fillers. Great ideas, however, non-allowable under ESSER 3. Anything that needs to be plumbed in or would require any sort of construction to remove or install is not allowable. So touchless water systems, dryers, etc., not allowable with EANS funding. And then this last one, this is an update. The U.S. Department of Education, we always say we'll do what the guidance says until the guidance changes. So the guidance was updated in this instance to clarify that cleaning supplies, yes, are allowable with EANS funding. However, cleaning services are not allowable with EANS funding. I will be transparent with you, and I disagree with the U.S. Department of Ed's determination here. So we have pushed back and advocated for maximum flexibility for our schools. I don't necessarily see the statutory reason why they were that explicit in black and white on that, but I don't necessarily see that as aligning to the spirit and intent of EANS. So for now, however, we will do what the guidance says, and that is that contracted cleaning supplies are not going to be allowable in EANS, but cleaning supplies themselves are going to be allowable. And if you have any other questions, we do have the U.S. Department of Ed FAQ as well as the IDOE EANS FAQ and resources linked throughout the presentation today. And then over on the right-hand side, Andrew has dealt has fielded a lot of questions, dealt with a lot of hard questions internally, sort of how do we approach this? So the statements over on the right-hand side are just to sort of help frame your application process, thinking like quality over quantity, making sure that we're not maximizing all the devices just to fit the dollar figure, but we're, matching the quality of our request to the quantity of our students, et cetera, making sure that if we have 100 students, we're not requesting 1,000 iPads for those students, but a more reasonable number. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add in general from the feedback you've gotten from the field, or questions that maybe some context that I'm lacking here?
Yeah, I would just say to always refer back to the EANS website, which is updated daily. Those 12, or I would say 13 allowable uses are kind of where you should be your starting point. Kind of see how you can fit an allowable activity to meet the needs of one of those 12. And I say 12 because the 13th is reimbursement. Always kind of relating it back to the pandemic, making sure it's a repair, not really brand new or reconstructing, and that it fits that temporary need. I would say a lot of the questions we've really been receiving is like thinking about that quality over quantity. So if you're a school of 100 students with staff as well, don't try and order 500 Chromebooks. Or if you're a school of, say, only 50 students with staff as well, don't try and over-order supplies just to spend your allocation. Make sure that you're really thinking short-term and long-term goals here, which I know can be really hard because so much seems up in the air right now, but also sitting down and thinking about the well-being of your staff and your families, guardians, and just really using the funding to the best of your ability. There you go, Cole.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we are about to jump into our application registration portal. This is just sort of a preview of the information that will be asked on of your organization to register for the application. All right. And then we wanted to talk about application timelines and expectations. So the application was made available on March 26th. We've opened it for preview right now to give people time to register, familiarize themselves with the application, get used to it, to be transparent, also to give Andrew and to give me some time to see how the system can be broken and how we can address questions on the fly. So that always needs a little bit of a pilot period. And unfortunately, we just weren't given that with statute. So we're trying to be proactive and deal with any issues this week instead of when everyone is applying and trying to fix them as they come. So the application will be live for submission as of April 5th. You'll see that anything you add to the application before then, the system will remind you, but anything you add to the system in preview will not be saved and will not be carried over into your actual EANS application. That is purely there for you to start familiarizing yourself with the system for educational purposes. The Department of Education, we have 30 days to review. We'll do our absolute best to meet that deadline for you. Please, I do want to set expectations here. The vast majority of applications will likely receive feedback from the department in terms of, I'm sorry, it's not approvable in this instance. You have an unallowable activity. Please revise, send your new activities to us, and we'll review and then finally get to a yes and an approval. We'll always get to a yes, but we may have to adjust your grant in the meantime to eventually get there to make sure everything is allowable and meets with all of our standards and requirements. And then the deadline for application is May 17th. We have to have an application here, a deadline here, so that we can sort of have a hard and set number on how many schools are participating, and then we may need to reconfigure allocations based on how many schools are opting in, and to make sure we're spending the minimum amount of funding for schools as per requirements of the law. And then once we have it approved, we will then work with ClassWallet, which will be our sort of our classroom, our vendor, essentially a vendor marketplace. Your application registration information needs to be accurate because that is also going to drive your ClassWallet registration and account information, because we will load your individual accounts from your approved application once we have a launch. So in transparency, we have about 30 days here for the application process. The ClassWallet launch will be a little bit staggered, a little bit later. but the two systems work seamlessly together, so we'll be able to take the one in from the application and upload that into the class wallet, so we're not duplicating any efforts here. Just some highlights of the application before we jump in and start playing around with that. Just some basics in terms of the information. The first round today, the first webinar, people responded fairly positively, I think, to, we try to keep it as streamlined as possible, knowing that you all have 81 million things to do without worrying about the $81 million of EANS funding. So we want to make sure that we're being responsive and supportive of you all. So the application will ask for your non-public school name and school code, EANS contact. We are asking for a business contact. We know that in the spirit of everybody wearing a lot of hats, some schools may have a staff member apply who may not have, authority to make some decisions in terms of funding and budgeting. So just making sure that you have an individual in the room where it happens, so that they are able to make those decisions. We will be asking for the overall enrollment, which we've already provided in our EANS allocation spreadsheet, as well as low income numbers, which we've also provided in the allocation spreadsheet, and we've linked to that in the application. We will have the school certify to all the things in the middle row, basically that they're nonprofit, that they're eligible. Essentially, this is a screening, a self-screening on your part, just saying that, yes, we are accredited nonprofit. We didn't have PPP on or after December 27th, 2020. And then just some key points. So again, EANS will allow for past reimbursement as well as future activities. So we'll have two spreadsheets that are embedded in the application that I'll show you, where you'll be able to fill out a spreadsheet, sort of a budget, identifying your vendor, essentially how many items you purchased, what the overall cost was, and then details about the reimbursement request that will then be uploaded into your application, and we will review that. I'll show the exact spreadsheet where you will download it, you'll save it locally, and then upload that. And then we'll also have one for future reimbursements as well, or future activities, excuse me. On both reimbursement and future activities, just a little bit of a pro tip or behind the scenes, where it says ask for a budget description. Essentially, we're saying, please provide enough detail here to help Cole and Andrew get to a yes for you. So, provide whatever detail you think we would need to know, is this a reasonable kind of request? Is it allowable with EANS? So, saying, I'd like 100 laptops, or I want laptops. Okay. Our question will be, how many? What are you using them for, to make sure it's an allowable EANS use? So please just be thoughtful of how much detail you're providing to help the Department of Ed get to a yes without having to ask for follow-up information or additional documentation. All right. We'll jump into the application. Yes. So we will start off by creating a new user. So if you are new with the application system, this is going to be pretty much exactly your process for accessing the application portal. So again, if you are a new user, we have instructions over to the right. Please be sure to click on Create New Account. And so we'll go through here, and I will type, and last time it worked really well when Andrew sort of spoke and gave some high-level information that we'll be asking for you. It may seem tedious, but we're going to actually type out each indicator here. It won't be real information, but we do want to show you some of the checks that the system has in place to sort of prevent any simple mistakes that may happen. Andrew?
Yeah, so as Cole's filling out this process, when you're a brand new user, you're going to see that you have to create a profile for your organization. The the vendor we used uses organization. It just means you're creating a profile for your non-public school. As you can see, as Cole is filling out, it does prompt you when something is typed in incorrectly, when something is not formatted correctly. I highly recommend to not use the autofill or auto-populate function that it comes with most of our computers. I only say that as I have been going through checking organizations, making sure things look good. I have seen several instances where it comes to address 1, address 2, city, state, and postcode, and Indiana is completely listed there for everything. So I'm having to go back into each organization and make the edits myself. I do believe that this actual organization profile you are not able to edit. I have to edit, or Cole will have to edit, or someone on the team will have to edit the organization. But Cole will also show you later in the process how once you get to the user field, you will be able to make user edits there. Just pointing out some key features, the telephone number does have to be entered as the example is shown. We are asking for a website. The reason for that is I'm sure most of you are used to InView, but as we've been collecting information, as we've been trying to reach out to everyone, we're realizing that school websites are not up to date, or there's an old URL. The same goes for emails and school phone numbers, so that's why we're asking for this information. So as you can see, we filled it out. Yes, it's going to be fake. We're not going to create this. And when you hit the next button, it's going to actually take you to creating a user. This is going to be an individual who is going to be the person in charge of creating the EANS application. You're going to have the option, which Cole will do, to add a secondary user, but this person that is creating the registration for the organization is also going to be the person creating the application. And as Cole did, you saw that the system alerted him that you cannot use this email because there's already an email address attached to an organization using a Dietrich, which is our administrator logins. So it says email/username. So when you do log into the system, you are using your email as your login. It does not have to be a completely new, I'm going to make amazer1234. No, you are going to use your email as your login. You do not get prompted for a password here. That's going to come later in the process. But notice we are asking for some of the similar information because that first page you completed was all about your school. This page is about the user. Yes, we completely understand that the address might be the same, which if Cole, you'll scroll back up. Oh, sorry. You can see it's going to say copy address from the organization. So we're fully aware that the address is a repeat, which is why that button is there. So you can just copy over, hopefully correctly, from the organization. I'm going to let Cole, I see there's something going on there. Oh, okay.
I fixed it. I'm not sure why it was still yelling at me. But if you noticed, it won't let you enter a school number that isn't an alphabetical letter followed by a number. 4 numbers, you have to have the phone number in the exact same format. So the system should tell you when you're making a mistake on a field.
Yes. So then I'm going to have Cole actually answer this question 2 ways. Are you the sole EANS administrator? So some non-pubs, as we know, you are handling every hat as an administrator, but some of you are lucky enough that you are going to have extras. So are you the sole? You're going to say no. You click no. When you click no, you're going to hit next. And then it's going to ask you for that same information. Looking up at the top, there is a copy address, so you don't have to repeat that. But this is going to be a secondary user. This is going to be an individual, maybe a business manager, the CFO, the assistant principal, the administrative assistant, someone that is also going to be able to log into the application and be able to make edits, tweaks, and provide feedback. As you can see, Cole is putting me because we are working as a team, and so on and so forth. Again, it's going to ask you about those formatting errors, which I think is very handy. And then you would click next. After he's done, I'm going to let him make all those fixes. But as you can see, the auto-populate really is not your friend here. It repeats things because it's trying to read the system and it makes errors. So now if you are ready to go, you would create a password and confirm it. But going back, I do want to show you what happens if you hit yes on that additional or the non-pub school leader question. Go back one more. So if you do hit, are you the sole person? Yes. For some reason, we have not been able to fix this yet. I just want to point out, if you hit yes, it's going to say, well, middle name, suffix, mobile number. Those boxes actually are the boxes you left blank that were in the user information. Do not worry about filling this out. You can simply just hit next and go straight to the password. For some reason, this is a glitch that we're unable to remove at the point because so many people have already created usernames. And then you would pick a password, confirm it, and then create the account. And so that, oh, go on, Cole.
Nope, I was just going to say that wraps up the registration. So in this instance, I already have an account, so I'm going to click cancel, create account creation. But you would click create account, and then that would finalize your registration.
Yes. So what, and also I've learned this as well, and it kind of makes sense. Once you've done the registration, I do believe you have to log out of the system and log back in to mark it as active. So once you do register, I don't know if it automatically takes you into the system, but do make sure that you do log out and log back in to make sure that your email works and your password. Before Cole logs in to look at as a proxy, if you forgot to do a secondary user, say you needed to add someone right now because they reached out and they're going to help you, you can contact me or Cole and we will walk you through the process in order to add one secondary user. So there will be the main user and then a secondary user.
Okay. So I will log on. These screens do not represent what you all will see. This is for our, like, the admin controls, essentially. So I am going to have to hijack somebody's account and use that as a proxy. So please bear with us. We will. All right, so I'm officially a proxy. I'm signing in as someone else. And so we have here the sort of the welcome page for you as part of the EANS. Just a reminder there again that it's a preview as of March 26th. Any information won't be saved. Again, the information will let you know, or the application will let you know that. If you need any additional information on the EANS program, we still have that linked here. Let's jump in. So most of this is self-explanatory, and I don't want to spend our time with me just reading what is on the screen for you, but we will go over some of the highlights and the information here. If it's got an asterisk, of course, it is required. So your non-public school name and school number, please be sure to use the official school name and school number. We know that there may be various schools with a similar name, St. John, for example. So we'll need to know the official school name and school number. That way we can make sure we're tying them together consistently.
Yeah.
If you're not sure what you're, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yes, this is, I'm sure some people are saying, well, this is a repeat. And there is a reason for that. Again, as Cole stated, just again, we need to make sure things are linked up, because moving further down the road with SIAC, which is the public fiscal agent, and Class Wallet, we need unique identifiers that link up, because there are over 10 St. Joseph's in the state of Indiana. There are over 10 St. John Evangelists. So this we are asking for, again, just to be clear that they match up with what you input the first time. Thank you.
And if you need to confirm your non-public school number, you can click this link to InView, search by your school name, and then your school number will pop up. We're also asking if you're associated with any networks, like an archdiocese or the Lutheran schools, any sort of network or sort of loosely sort of a district that you're with, just so that we can better plan and support you all and make some connections internally. We're also asking for the school district or the LEA where you're geographically located. So, you know, wherever your school is located, the physical address, what school district do you find that school in? If you could please list that. We also ask if the school district has received a PPP loan before December 27th. It's not an eligibility question. This is just to make sure this is asked for in the federal guidance. And then we also ask for equitable share from CARES 1.0 or the first round of ESSER funds. Some non-public schools received an equitable share as part of CARES. Some schools did not. So we're just asking if you did receive an equitable share as from CARES 1.0. Again, this is asking for the business contact of the school, someone who would be sort of a fiscal oversight or representative for the school, someone who's authorized to make those sort of decisions for the organization. This is sort of like I mentioned, that self-check on eligibility. So just signing off and certifying that, yes, your school meets each one of the eligibility questions here. If you are worried about your school meeting those or not, if you're not sure if your school was in existence prior to March 13th, 2020, or in operation, please reach out. Andrew and I can assist you with that. So you'll certify that yes or no, you do meet the eligible criteria. If you do not meet the eligibility criteria, please reach out to the DOE team and we can discuss that for you.
Yes, you want to hit yes here. The goal is to hit yes. If you hit no, you should be reaching out to us ASAP so we can have those conversations.
All right. And so we are also required to ask at least around the enrollment and low income. Indiana is a few steps ahead of other states where they are actually collecting numbers and data as part of their application process. Indiana, since we have a robust voucher program, and non-public school program, we had quite a bit of this data ready to go. So that saves us a lot of time and headache on the back end. In terms of preventing you all from accessing it while we're running the numbers and everything of that sort. So we will ask you for your overall student enrollment counts as well as your low income student accounts. We have linked here for both of those questions, linked you to the Department of Education EANS eligibility and allocation web spreadsheet. So if I am school A26, I'm going to look right over here for my overall enrollment total of 30. And my low income student count of 26. So I'm going to enter 30 and 26 in my application. And again, here it's going to warn you that this is in preview and this will not be saved. Just as a reminder, your allocations will likely shift due to how many student or schools participate in the EANS program or not participate. So your count numbers, we have those already. Your allocations likely will change, so please stay tuned for that. We'll need the full application process to shake out and see how much money everyone is accepting, and then make sure that we're offering at least the minimum to all schools.
Yes, and we also aligned some of the verbiage. So overall student enrollment is just another way of saying total enrollment. But if you click the PDF, the column is overall student enrollment. Same for low income. It just means poverty counts. But in the PDF, it is titled low income counts. And as Cole said, and just being proactive, you are going to budget for what is on this PDF. And it's don't budget over it. You're just going to budget up to what you see on the PDF as you're planning allocation.
And then we'll ask for a percentage of low income. So take these numbers and generate a percentage, and then please enter that as a decimal. The system would not accept an actual percentage. And then COVID impact, we'll just ask for a short narrative. I believe the cap here is about 250 characters or words, excuse me, on the impact of COVID on your school, sharing any data you think is necessary for us, for our context as we review your grant. So you can mention, any sort of disruptions to the learning environment, virtual education, et cetera. You can sort of share a narrative on the impact of COVID-19 on your school. In the budget section, our introduction is again leading with the allowable activities that we want to put front and foremost for everyone, both allowable activities overall, and then activities that may be allowable but not necessarily reimbursable. If you have any questions about that distinction, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to help out. If you have any additional questions or you want to take a look again at some of the allowability guidance that we've put out, feel free to click. We have linked to it here as well. And I mentioned the budget spreadsheets and templates that we've provided. So we've embedded those in the application. So if you click on the blue links, so for instance here, this is the request for prior reimbursement. If I click on this blue link, that will open up a reimbursement or a past activities web. Let me bring that over. So as you can see, we have some examples here of the reimbursement activities that we are requesting. just with the vendors, and then the amount of funding, the number of the items, and here's that description like I was mentioning. Again, pro tip would be to think through what sort of documentation or what sort of evidence would someone want to know in order to show that this is allowable through the EANS program.
Cool, I just want to jump in here. I had a great question. You're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So think of it in terms of money. So for example, that line or row 6 has, I can't see, it's so small, but 0.75 cents, that's okay. Do not round to the whole dollar. I would try and round to the cent, but also when you are in the application updating the total enrollment and the low income, please do not update those numbers. Do not change them. We are asking that you use the numbers provided to you on the PDF. If you submit numbers that do not match, we will submit or send the application right back asking for you to please make those changes. As Cole stated, we are fully aware that there are several schools that have already applied for PPP, so they're ineligible even though they have a planning allocation, or there are several schools who are on the planning allocation document that are not going to apply for this funding because they don't want to deal with quote unquote the red tape or the strings attached to federal funding, which is a lot. So there is going to be a chance that there is more money from EANS 1 that will be reallocated to those schools that do apply for EANS 1 funding. So please do not change the numbers. They will have to match from the PDF that we have supplied on the EANS website and also in the application. If you change or make any alterations, we will resubmit the application back to you for changes. And also to clarify, PK counts are not included in overall enrollment or poverty counts, but the funding can be used on a PK if it is a part of your program. Again, you are not allowed per law to include PK counts in the counts for overall enrollment or low income counts.
Yep, so this is the past reimbursement request, our budget. So I would fill this out, save it locally, and we have instructions for saving on your local computer, and then you would upload that to the application. So if you see here, we have instructions for saving it. Save it as your non-public school code and prior. So I am school A002, so I will be A002 prior. Then I will come here, upload, select the file. We're also asking that you enter how much your total reimbursement request is on the application or on the budget page. And then when we're on the conversation of rounding, if you round up to the nearest penny, as Andrew said, and then when you get close to your allocation, if you go over by a penny, make sure you're rounding down. We can't ever round up in state finances. We always round down. I've had to learn that the hard way through procurement fun. Similar to the request for prior services, we have the same system. You'll click on the link and that will open up a template for your budget for new requests. Please name that A002 new. And then you will upload and include the total amount of figures you have reserved for new activities. I did want to so the registration for your vendors, we have linked here just to make it easy for you while you're doing that. Oh, let me click on that. Here's the link. I can send that out to my partners that I'd like to work with. And we will go over the vendor registration here in just a second. And then ultimately we need you to certify that all the above information is correct regarding your school, and then agreeing to all of the the strings attached to the federal money, just in terms of eligibility and overall just assurances on how the money will be used in the grant. And then we have a signature date, the email of the authorized representative, and then by typing your name in here, that is serving as your signature for the grant. And then you will click submit and your grant will be done. So Andrew, I know you wanted me to show, I've done my application. I noticed there's something wrong in my profile, correct? So if you go up here to your control area where you find your name and drop down, you go to edit my profile. I'm not going to click on that because it would show the individual's information. I don't know if that would be personal or not, but you could edit my profile and that's where you'll be able to change your fields. Right. I am back to being Cole now. So we'll talk here for just briefly about the vendor registration application. So there are just a few boxes that we'll need them to check on for state procurement. So we need to ensure that they're not suspended nor debarred just from working on any federal grant projects. So they can check on the SAM.gov, which is the System for Award Management.gov. They'd be able to check there. We have instructions embedded in the application for what they need to look for. We also need to ensure that they are registered and active with the Secretary of State here in Indiana. And we also have to have assurances that both the services that the vendor will offer are secular, non-ideological, and neutral in nature, and that they are independent of the non-public school. So the vendor can be a religious organization, but the services that they are providing with EANS will have to be secular, and that's similar to the equitable share process and any partnerships you have through your other federal funds through the school districts. All right. So the EANS vendor registration portal, we have, again, that linked. Andrew went through today and updated all the guidance documents and has all the links in the right place for our vendor registration. So feel free to share that out now. We've had a couple applicants already, which is exciting. So this will take you to the IDOE EANS vendor registration portal. We have some basic information there for them to familiarize themselves with the process that we're about to ask them to go through. We'll ask, of course, for vendor information and address. We're going to have them list the schools that they're planning on working with as part of EANS, just for our own internal knowledge, so that we can say, oh, I saw they were going to work with this school and this school. Maybe we can work with that to reduce duplication of efforts, or let the other school know, oh, this has already been approved. Listing schools here does not obligate them to work with those schools or not, one way or another. This is just for Andrew and for me to revise, to look over. Part 2 is our federal disbarred vendor list verification, where they'll go in and check on SAM.gov. They'll need to upload a file here, just to drag and drop to upload the file as documentation or proof that they do not have any active exclusions, I think is the actual term on here. So it'll say active exclusions, no, and that's what we want here for our vendors. So they will upload a PDF version of that. Basically the same story for the Secretary of State registration. They'll go onto the database to search for their vendor and to ensure that they are registered and active with the Secretary of State's office. Just a note that Andrew and I do not work for the Secretary of State, and we are unable to provide any guidance on InBiz, so we will have the vendors self-advocate and take over that role for themselves to make sure that they are following through with any Secretary of State regulations and requirements. Part 4 is where we're asking if the vendor may have worked with another school district, such as providing, if Catapult's worked with a number of school districts to provide services for non-pubs as part of equitable share, then including them, if they have gone through that process with an LEA, that's additional documentation that we would find handy in terms of, making sure we've checked all of our boxes. So they're able to upload any documentation that they would have here of work that they've done where they may have previously been screened by a public agent for similar procurement purposes. And then finally, just assurances, basically promises that they ensure that it's all correct and that they have met all the eligibility question or requirements above, and that they understand that if there are any funds that were used on unallowable activities, that the vendor is the individual who will lose out on the money if it is not approved by the Department of Education and not allowable under EANS. So they'll need to make sure that they're signing on to that prior to participating in the program. There was some concern shared about the onerous nature of these requirements. This is not, however, an area where the Department of Education is able to be flexible. These are state procurement guidelines that we will have to follow. Orange jumpsuits are not a good look for me or Andrew in Grants Jail, so we need to make sure that we're keeping everybody out of Grants Jail, and that we are making sure we're following dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's for the procurement as well. All right. I did a little bit better on time than I did the first round. So we have about 14 minutes here where we have Q&A. I know Andrew's been checking the chat function here, so we can go over any questions that you have that we haven't addressed already. And feel free to unmute yourself or ask any questions directly. Andrew, were there any from, it looks like Andrew responded to quite a few in there. Were there any that you wanted to share or that we weren't able to address yet?
I know, I think I've been able to hit all of them. If I know a few individuals have done a private message to me, so please do make sure to send that email just as a heads up, and just to be very transparent. I am taking the next few days off for a personal matter. So my communication may be a little delayed if you're used to getting instant feedback from me. So please do keep that in mind. It is also a holiday this weekend, so the Department of Education will be closed on Friday, just as that heads up. Okay, thank you. So I'm trying to think of any great questions or questions that came from last session. You guys are a little more quiet than our first session. The chat was blowing up.
Andrew, Andy asked a good question. So reimbursements go to the school, but do these expenses need to be only from approved vendors? So Andy, yes, that we will be checking, on your reimbursement form, we ask the vendor. And so vendors will also, for reimbursements, will need to register as part of that, or we'll need to know that they at least can satisfy those requirements as well. Regardless of whether it's a new activity or a prior one, we still wouldn't be able to allow it unless it met our own vendor thresholds and controls. So yes, even previous vendors will need to be registered.
Yeah, I just want to just add to that, Cole, is vendors have to be approved if they've been in the past, the present, or the future. And I know that does add some extra work and undue stress to what's going on in the world right now. But in order for Cole and I to stay out of orange jumpsuits, we do need to make sure that all of the activities that funding was used for is an allowable activity. And sadly, that does include asking them to do those pre-registration steps as a vendor, as well as submitting an application. That's why one of the additional optional pieces is if they've worked with an LEA before, if they've done this whole process with equitable services, that adds extra documentation, but we still do need to make sure they're on SAM.gov with an active no exclusions, as well as registered with the Secretary of State. And then assuring their services are what they are. And I know it adds extra work, but please do understand this is not coming from Cole and I wanting you guys to do extra work. This is from above our heads. So just keep that in mind. Another good question from Nicole, just timeline after May 17th. We will have access to the funding. We are going to do an additional webinar around funding, reimbursements, how to work with Class Wallet, what does Class Wallet look like. So those details are forthcoming. Andy asked another great question. Amazon, Walmart, and other national vendors. Cole and I are going to talk hopefully within the next few days, well, before the end of today, about those big business corporations, because we do understand that you can't reach out to Tim Cook at Apple and say, hey, Tim, I need you, or Tom, to fill out this vendor application. Make sure you're registered with the state, because we know Amazon, Walmart are reliable and not barred businesses, and that I'm pretty sure that they are somehow registered with maybe the federal government. So we will make sure to release some guidance around big business such as Amazon, Walmart, Meijer, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards.
So for Nicole's question, I need some additional context here. Having access to the funding, so the date by which all activities that you have approved in your EANS application have to be completed is September 30th of 2023. So you have access to the funds until that period, until that time. You would still be able to, we would have about 60 days thereafter to, activities have to happen by the 30th. You might get invoiced on the 1st of October. You'll still need to liquidate on the other end and have the vendor apply for reimbursement for those activities. So the longer answer is 9/30/2023 is how long you have access to those funds.
Cole, thanks for that. I was thinking on the front end when
you actually get the money.
Correct.
Yes. We've got to build that system first, and then we'll let you know. I do not think it's going to be too much of a delay. If it's for reimbursements, because that's the only time you'd actually be getting, money back. It'll depend on what you're reimbursing for, and if it's an item that we'll have to inventory along with SIEC. And then when we're working with SIEC, essentially once the non-public school meets all of the inventory requirements that they're going to put in place, then they'll be able to issue payments. So it shouldn't be too awful long, but there's a lot of area in there where it could be back and forth between the school, and if the school takes a while to meet the inventory requirements, a lot of that could be out of SIEC or IDOE's hands. Kevin said, this is an example of what public school administrators deal with for every dollar they spend. Yes, so essentially, if it feels like equitable services, it is. It's just Cole and Andrew doing equitable services instead of your LEAs or your school district. So yes, and that is something that most states weren't set up for. We've never had to do that before. So this has been quite the experience at the state level.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think John points out a big business and will there be a list of vendors. So as vendors apply through the JOT form and they're approved by us, we're hopefully going to get a live document that lists vendors that have already been, I don't want to say pre-approved, but have been approved and who they're working with. So other non-public schools can get access to that list and maybe reach out to them. Like I stated a little bit before, Cole and I have to have a conversation about those big businesses. So maybe we can get a PDF or another living document, or just add it to the one that's already been started. So we can let you know, hey, purchases through Amazon, through Walmart, and so on and so forth are allowable as long as they hit this criteria of A, B, and C. So again, just be patient with us. As Cole has said several times, we're flying 3 planes while also building them and trying to be proactive, and we do greatly appreciate your patience, as well as the questions, because they make us think, because we may not be seeing it through your lens.
Yeah, and that's where it's important that you know which vendor you're wanting to work with on your budget sheets. That way, if we see, Amazon or Walmart, we can do some things on the state procurement side, so you're not having to, like you said, chase down Cook, CEO of Apple, to have them sign some paperwork. So we'll be able to work with that a little bit. Yeah, I was going to say that someone mentioned hiring staff. It's absolutely in the realm of possibility to have a service agreement with a contractor to provide staff. I've seen anything, and Andrew mentioned Catapult, Fax, or Crossroads. Another organization who would be able to pay the staff, since we would be unable to pay staff directly through the non-public school.
Yes, just talking about that, I know it's a little unique situation, but third-party service contractors, vendors such as Catapult, Fax, Crossroads, or any that you already work with are great resources to hire summer school staff, after school, before, during, just additional ways to use the funding. The hard part when it comes to paying for that is you would have to be hired by the state or SIEC, which is not feasible. There's no way possible. The hiring process at the state is months. So that would even delay the funding more. However, one solution that we have kind of been throwing around is asking your LEA, if you happen to have a great working relationship, which I know they do exist, and I'm trying to build that through equitable services, asking your LEA to function as a third-party vendor. They would still have to submit an application. We understand they probably already check the pre-app to-dos, but they would submit an application using the JOT form, and maybe you can work with them on a summer school program where they hire your staff using EANS funding. I know there's already one LEA out there that is kind of toying around the idea with a non-public school, so that might be an option for you to look into if you would like to hire staff.
Yes, Kelly Services would work as a third party. Actually, I think they're one of the first vendors that got in an application. Vicky asks, can you explain SIAC's role in this process? Will the local vendors that I'm working with in turn work with them, or will the school itself work with SIAC? I'm new to all of this. Vicky, the good news is we are all new to all of this for EANS, so don't worry, you're in good company here. So SIAC, essentially, once we get a request for reimbursement, that budget, we'll flag that, and you'll still have your reimbursements run through the Class Wallet marketplace. But SIAC then will sort of carry the ball on from there, work with the individual school. So let's say you have 50 iPads that you want to reimburse for. That's great. We need a public agent to be in charge of those then, because we'll have you transfer ownership of the property to SIAC as the public agent. And then SIAC will say, please make sure you're doing this, this, and this in terms of inventory, something similar to what public school districts would do with if they had purchased iPads through their Title I for your school. And then once SIAC, they'll take care of all the documentation of all the inventory and everything. Once they have all that, we'll clear you in the system for reimbursement and payment through the Class Wallet system. That's at least how I think it's going to go in my head. Again, that's what it looks like on the blueprints. When the rubber hits the road, that's what we imagine it'll be looking like. When we have a kickoff meeting with Class Wallet, we'll also be sure to introduce you to the team there at SIAC, Amy Gonerman and Judy Buchert. They've done work with us on gear applications in the previous round of stimulus funding for several non-public schools. So they are good partners in the work. Will the items you purchase be delivered to SIAC first? So that is one thing where we will likely set up in the Class Wallet system. The easiest for you all would be to have the items go to you and then the billing go to SIAC, since they are technically the owner, and then SIAC can work with you in terms of, here's the inventory documentation that we'll need you to do, submit it to us by X date. And then you'll be able to continue on. If you don't do the inventory or you don't respond to SIAC, Cole and Andrew, and maybe John, if we can convince him, will be showing up to grab those computers to encourage swift compliance. We'll put it that way. Thank you, Vicky. It was a good question.
And that's also why just talking about registration with the site where your address is correct is that hopefully the information put into the application is going to be transferred to Class Wallet, which is why PO boxes are not allowed, because the goal, as Cole has said, is we are hoping that you make the order comes to you, and the bill goes to SIAC. Those are fingers crossed. Let's see, any other questions?
Just knowing, I guess, that that timeline on when you'll get the computers or et cetera, that won't start immediately once your application is approved. We'll have to get these uploaded and loaded into the Class Wallet, especially just starting off here, everybody. If you can give us a little bit more grace and patience as we figure out the launch of that second piece, we'll be all set. But I think we are, we've cut down the timelines in terms of turnaround that the state would have to go through. They went through our procurement division, our finance division, Chrissy Sidris. She doesn't often get to be a hero, but she certainly was on this one in terms of working out with the auditor of state to arrange to pay out on a quicker basis to make sure we're getting funds to everybody as soon as possible. So I don't have hard and set timelines in terms of how long between the application approval and then when you're actually getting the devices or the funds, but just know that we are working as hard as possible to cut down that time to as short as possible lag time for you all.
Cole, one of the things that's come up around timing is schools that want to establish summer programs for learning loss and things like that, and we'll be able to get things turned around in time for them to put those things into motion.
Mm-hmm. I think there would be, especially with our deadline of being May 17th. In terms of once we approve your budget, at that point, it's sort of like a yes, we're good to go. So if you get approval on your budget, I'd say you could move forward with finding partners. Just with everybody knowing that any spending that happens before we get, pen on a paper and everything else happens at own risk. But if they're trying to get a summer school program going, they have a third-party vendor. The vendor's been registered with us and everything else like that. If you have something that's time sensitive, let us know. But I don't see any concerns with allowing it to happen. And then we can go back and we can reimburse at that point.
and also looking into spending that remaining ESSER 1 equitable services. I know several schools did not get that, but I would spend that down first before you start to tap into EANS. But understandably, we know you guys are planning ahead. Also, thinking even more long term, maybe summer school right now is not feasible. Your staff needs a break. Everyone's overwhelmed, but next summer might be a great way to really focus and design a well thought out, comprehensive program that is going to address not only academics, but social, emotional, the whole child, a holistic approach to the education of that student and those students and families.
You know, Andrew, one of the things I've heard some schools talk about is rather than summer school, like you said, if they're struggling with needing a break, is to do an early start program where they're bringing people back or kids back 2 weeks, 3 weeks early and doing some intensive work with kids, you know, later on. So everybody has some time for a break as well. Well, folks, I'm looking at my clock and I'm seeing that it's saying about 5:02. And this is our second rodeo today. Cole and Nathan, Nathan's and Gary. Cole and Andrew have done this at 1 o'clock today as well as at 4 o'clock. And so we greatly appreciate their time and working with us. And as they've both alluded, there's going to be a part 3 to this as we start talking about requisitioning and how to work with SIEC and with Class Wallet. So at least now you can start working on the application process, get the applications in, and then when we take that next step, we'll have another webinar, so stay tuned for that. Remember, this was all recorded, and if you registered for today, Heidi will be sending out a recording, and you'll get a copy of the slides with that, although I think Andrew probably posted that in the chat as well. So with that said, I'm sure you'll continue to have questions, and Andrew will continue to type out answers and give him a break for the rest of this week, but he'll be back at it next week. So appreciate our partnership with these guys, and thank you folks for joining us. To be continued. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, everyone.